Позвольте мне от оперативной группы Министерства обороны СССР вручить вам почетный грамоту.
As a reward, each soldier receives a liquidator certificate from the army and a 100-ruble bonus, the equivalent today of about $100 US. They have risked their lives, but they've only reduced the radiation level on the roof by 35%.
When they sent all those people up onto the roof, no one knew exactly the actual level of radiation. Now we know it was between 10,000 and 12,000 roentgens per hour. At that level of radioactivity, people never should have been sent.
7 months after the explosion, the zone has been cleaned up and the sarcophagus completed. 500,000 people, military and civilians, have participated in the operation.
I told the Commission that for having confronted such levels of radioactivity, having cleaned up all that graphite and having accomplished such heroic tasks, our soldiers needed something symbolic, like putting up our flag.
Putting the flag up was like putting the flag on the Reichstag. When the Red Army conquered fascism, for them, the flag was a symbol of their triumph over radioactivity.
Each team of liquidators celebrates the end of the operation in their own way. Bocharov and his men etch their names onto the final metal piece to go up on top of the sarcophagus.
Our sarcophagus is a pantheon, a tomb, a mausoleum. Our second mausoleum. After that, we stopped building nuclear power plants.
После этого и перестали строить атомные станции.
A bitter victory. The country will never recover.
It cost us 18 billion rubles. At that time, a ruble was worth $1. 18 billion. That's huge. And if you consider that shortly after the price of oil collapsed, you can imagine the trouble our country and perestroika were up against.
The first snow has started to stick on Chernobyl. For the authorities, this proves the sarcophagus is airtight, at least for 30 years, or so they predict. The liquidators have gone home. Reactors 1, 2, and 3 are back up and running. The first battle of Chernobyl has ended in a victory that heralded the end of the USSR. But for many, it also marks the beginning of a war that 20 years later still hasn't ended. 20 years later, Pripyat is still a ghost town. Accompanied by Igor Kostin, Yulia wanted to see the apartment where she lived with her family up until the fateful day of their evacuation. Contrary to what they'd been told, not a single inhabitant was ever able to come back to live in the deserted buildings.
Потрогай стену, раз ты пришла к себе домой.
For Igor Kostin as well, the visit stirs up painful memories. He was fatally exposed to radiation during the 7 months he spent covering the battle. Since then, he's had to be hospitalized for over 2 months each year.
Новую энергию в завтрашний день. Родина, как никто, был больше дает энергию человеку. Это твоя родина, твоя земля сейчас так впитала все мощное, что только мы не можем быть отсюда.
У меня такое ощущение, что я здесь была всю жизнь.
For the hundreds of thousands of atomic refugees, as for the hundreds of thousands of veterans from the Battle of Chernobyl, the fight against their invisible enemy hasn't let up. Everyone who went to Chernobyl is still suffering from the radioactivity their bodies absorbed. In the months following the accident, the liquidators flooded into hospitals all over the Soviet Union. 20 years later, those who are still alive continue to frequent Hospital Number 6. They're all victims of what specialists have since named the Chernobyl syndrome.
We've all got a bunch of symptoms: heart, stomach, liver, kidneys, nervous system. Our whole bodies were radically upset by the metabolic changes caused by radiation and chemical exposure.
When the liquidators went back home, they were exhausted, incapable of going back to normal life. 20 years later, many of those who survived are disabled and unable to work. And the authorities appear to be ignoring their plight by cutting down their welfare money.
The veterans of the war in Afghanistan are still alive, while we are slowly wasting away. I have written a poem about this. Sadness fills me, nostalgia and anguish. Like a bullet in the temple, nothing can ever stop. The mother prays in secret to God to spare his life.
These men weren't even 30 when they were sent in to battle the atom. Today, the survivors are not yet 50 years old, but they struggle like senior citizens. According to the military, of the 500,000 Chernobyl liquidators, 20,000 have already died. 200,000 are officially disabled.
You don't know how long you have to live, or what disease is going to kill you. You don't know what effects it will have on your children, if you have any. We know all that, and we know the invisible enemy is eating away inside of us like a worm. For us, the war continues, and little by little, we're slipping away from this world.
Yet for 2 decades, only 59 deaths have been officially attributed to the Chernobyl disaster. Not a single study has been carried out of the 130,000 refugees from the zone. Not a single statistic on the state of the 500,000 liquidators. No figures on the population that continues to live around Chernobyl and in the contaminated areas. The real amount of radiation these people were exposed to has never been revealed to them.
6-0, да? Це вже підвищується. Вчора була 5 і 7, а сьогодні вже 6-0.
Це не підвищується, таке може бути.
Да?
Плюс-мінус.
Плюс-мінус. Це не таке страшне. Слухайте, до скількох страшне?
До скількох?
Ну, кажіть правду.
До скількох страшне?
До скількох? До 20.
A deputy of the Supreme Soviet discovered the systematic cover-up of the true consequences of Chernobyl when the Soviet Empire dissolved in 1991. Taking advantage of the anarchy in the country, she managed to get her hands on a copy of top-secret documents. 600 pages of a report to the Central Committee, written while the Battle of Chernobyl was still raging.
When I read these documents, I discovered everything happened differently.